your brand isn't like your logo or your slogan. It's like all these little touch points that people have with you, right? And were they positive touch points? Were they joyful touch points? We talked about content marketing. I know that's your side of the house. Like I ran a lot of content teams, and I always said, hey, I want you to build like helpful, good content. I don't want you to make slimy brochureware that just says why we're awesome in 20 different ways.
Welcome to Insights Unlocked, an original podcast from User Testing, where we bring you candid conversations and stories with the thinkers, doers, and builders behind some of the most successful digital products and experiences in the world, from concept to execution.
Welcome to the Insights Unlocked podcast. I'm Nathan Isaacs, Principal Content Marketing Manager at User Testing. And our guest today is Bill Macaitis. Bill is a marketing powerhouse who's led growth at some of the most iconic brands in tech, including Slack, Zendesk, and Salesforce. Now an executive advisor and board member, Bill brings a customer-obsessed mindset and a passion for building beloved brands that scale. Welcome to the show, Bill.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Nathan.
Bill, as I mentioned, you've had a great run in B2B marketing, but you also worked in B2C before that, and now you advise some of today's most exciting AI startups. How did your journey in marketing begin, and what were some of the pivotal moments that shaped how you think about building brands and go-to-market strategies?
Yeah, I've been really fortunate from the standpoint that I always knew I wanted to get into business. I always knew I wanted to get into like startups and marketing. And, I did my first startup right out of college. We were in the Midwest. We didn't even know there were things called VCs that would give you money. So we had to build a profitable company, which was not really in vogue at the time. But we did an online gaming startup, and we had subscription tiers and models, and we were profitable and we sold it. And so like, it's just something like I've always been super fascinated by it. I think it's like super curious. And for me, like, I think I dabbed in programming really early. Like in fifth grade, I tried to like program a game and it was horrible. I just had like syntax error line after line after line. And I said, I'm not a good coder, but I love the business stuff. Right. And so for me, I really spent the next part of my career on the B2C side, just really focused on the marketing and the go-to-market side, and the fun thing is like when you're in B2C, you are marketing, but you're also sales. Like there's no giant sales team generally in B2C, right? Like marketing is doing a lot of the revenue. They're doing a lot of the growth, a lot of the brand building, a lot of the awareness. So, I think spending about 15 years there, working for some large media companies, News Corp, IGN Entertainment, going through several acquisitions, it just taught me a little bit of a different style on how you can build and grow these online properties. And then, kind of coming over to B2B, it equipped me with a much different skill set than I think a lot of kind of traditional B2B marketers had.
Well, and I think, going back to that first experience you had where you had to build something and make it profitable, you had to learn all those hard lessons where if you're a Stanford grad and you just get some VC money for an idea, you can just throw money at the problem and somebody else will figure it out. But you've already thought about all that stuff and can apply it and really make it leverage all that experience. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say it helped me. I thought was one of the most important things that I learned in my career was like anyone can buy growth, but how do you get it like capital efficiently? And that first online startup, we did a ton of like viral marketing. We did a ton of like partnerships. We did a ton of content, like early SEO, a lot of stuff that it wasn't just here's a $10 million check and go do a massive ad campaign. And not saying those don't have their places, but it really taught on me really early that, hey, like in startups, you have to think about capital efficiency. And I know that goes in and out of vogue over the years, right? Depending on how hot the economy is and how hot the funding environment is. But I just think like you have to have that. And even the companies that, got massive rounds now, like I see them, they're struggling from the standpoint, like they can't go IPO unless you have the right unit economics, unless you are capital efficient with your growth, right? Or maybe they got a huge round in 2021 and now it's like they need another round, but they're underwater. And a lot of it's just because like, it was growth at all costs. And so I think it's a really important discipline for, marketers and anyone building and scaling these new AI and SaaS startups. Like AI is so hot and everybody can get funding now, but hey, like the average time to exit is like 12.3 years, right? Like what is the environment going to be then? And are you still capital efficiently growing? Are you profitable? Like I think those are really cornerstones of how you build and scale a company.
And you're talking about it in the context as a founder, but I think even as a marketer and you're working in demand gen, thinking about how you can solve these problems without having to use money will make you so that when you do have the money, you're much more effective at it. I was just watching a documentary about Spike Jonze, the legendary skateboarder, cinematographer. And it all started from just having a passion and figuring out how to do things on the fly. Nobody had done it at that point in time. And, as we live in today's world with AI, start thinking about it that way. How can I solve this problem in a way that no one else has done it before? Anyway, enough about Spike Jonze. But, it led to his success. It's why he's so successful, is all that experimentation.
Absolutely. Like, I remember when I was working for IGN Entertainment, I really got into SEO. And at the time, SEO wasn't really mainstream. There weren't any classes on it. It wasn't that big of a thing. But like, I knew how powerful that could be for us because we were producing a ton of content. And I just remember, like, every night after work, I spent 4 or 5 hours going through everything, every single forum I could find, every single article, learning about like Black Hat, backlinks, domain authority. And I just kind of taught myself over a couple months, right? And I think like today, in a really cool way for all the new marketers coming out, like you have this entire new paradigm shift around AI tools and like, hey, and there aren't a lot of formal classes for it, right? But a lot of it's just like, are you just curious? And do you want to try things out and fail and, where to use AI? And it's just like, it totally opens up and it really levels the playing field too. It doesn't matter if you have, 30 years of marketing experience. Sometimes just a new person coming out that really knows how to use AI well can be in a great position. So I think that intellectual, curiosity that Spike had is like, it's really important.
And we will be talking more about AI as the interview goes along. But right now I wanted to talk about you've championed customer centricity throughout your career. And I'm just wondering, how do you operationalize that in an enterprise setting where we're so focused on short-term metrics that often dominate, the conversations?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think for me, I really got into customer centricity because I just think about it like as an average person. And for a while, I wasn't. Like, so when I worked at IGN, I was in charge of the subscription model. And you would do things like, hey, if we make this a little bit harder to cancel, like if we put it in smaller font, like our revenues will go up in the short run, right? And it's all like short run stuff. And then at some point, it's going to hit me like, God, we're giving like a horrible experience for people. And I started really shifting into customer centric. And then when I finally moved over to B2B, I saw the entire funnel was horrible if you were a prospect, right? You would find out about a company, maybe you go to their website and, hey, I just want to learn more. And literally you can't find anything. Everything's behind the gates. You have to fill a massive form. You get harassed by salespeople. You're not ready to buy yet. You finally do buy, all the customer success runs away. The only time they help you is, right before your year is about to come up and you're about to renew, then they come and help you. You can't get support. That's buried. It was like the worst experience possible. And I just thought that like, hey, if you want to grow and grow efficiently again, like you got to have word of mouth. You got to have people that are talking about it and recommending it. So I do think, like, to your original question there, enterprise companies really get caught in this trap of short-term thinking, right? And not really thinking about like what's best for the customer, right? And I thought like Bezos had a great quote in his early days of Amazon where they would always keep like a seat open. And anytime they're having a meeting, at the end of the meeting, be like, hey, whatever we talked about, decide what would the average like customer think about this, right? Was this like a customer friendly move or was it something that just pissed people off? And so I do think it's important. I think it's really hard. I think like customer-centric companies really dominate and win in the long run, and they have massive growth, but it's so hard to build. You have to have the board aligned behind it, the C-suite aligned behind it. You have to have customer-centric metrics that you track. Like I like Net Promoter Score, or CSAT, or daily active users. There's a bunch of them, but you actually have to track them. You have to incentivize people on them. You have to like pay them based on them. There's so many things that make it like a really, really hard playbook to execute, especially when you're at the enterprise and you've already been doing things for 10 years the same way. It's really hard to change those patterns.
2 points there I was thinking about is I wonder how tied to what we were talking about earlier and capital efficiency, knowing having the right metrics later on, right? If you're efficient with your money, you don't have to be so worried about having massive growth right now to lead into your next funding round. You're like, we can afford this. We can take our time building this the right way. And then you talk about, what are the metrics to track to kind of know customer centricity? And maybe you can share your thoughts on this. But we had Sangram Vadre on, and his metric he's really fascinated with is NRR, so that how many of your customers are staying your customers, and can you keep that metric? That's a good sign that you are customer centric. If you can, how close to 100 or even farther than that you can get.
Yeah, certainly, right? Like expansion too. That's a huge part of it. It's just, hey, your existing customers, are they growing and expanding over time with NRR? I think metrics drive behavior. I mean, at the end of the day, like I work for a lot of different companies, and what I found is, I think most people are good people. They're trying to do their job well. And if you tell someone that, like, for instance, in marketing, leads is your only metric, you're going to just try to get leads, right? And you're going to put everything behind a paywall and a gate, and you're going to get people that probably even aren't good fits for your product, but, they still became a lead, and you're going to do all this stuff to, like, maximize leads, right? And I think, like, that's, again, one thing I noticed in B2B was that, like, how it was done 30 years ago, a lot of it is still the same playbook on go to market. I'm always amazed. Like, I'll see like a really cool AI company, and they've done an incredible job with the product. It's like, whoa, it's groundbreaking. And then I'll like kind of peel back the onion on the go to market, and it's a really old playbook. It's like outbound sales, top down enterprise, press releases, events. And that's just how they've built it, classic funnel, leads, MQLs, pipeline opportunities. So I just think, like, a lot of the customer centric, it's a much different paradigm shift, right? It's thinking about, hey, what are the right customer centric metrics? How do we track it? How do we incentivize people? How do we have all these teams work together that are historically siloed to drive these? I remember at Slack for us, we had 3 primary company North Star metrics. It was ARR, DAUs, daily active users, and Net Promoter Score. Right. And all the teams shared in that. We didn't just say, like, oh, marketing, you just do this, or sales, you just do this, or product, we all shared. So, it was a very customer centric culture, but I think a lot of that starts with the right metrics, the board being behind it, having a little bit more of a longer term viewpoint. Because then once you start to get like that amazing customer centric word of mouth, K factor growth, like, it just starts to grow crazy. And it's an amazing playbook if you can kind of pull it off.
Well, how do you get that? How do you adopt that playbook? How do you, when we're talking about being customer centric and we're mentioning metrics, but how do you get that customer back involved to know what the right metrics are, to know what the playbook should be, or anything, like, especially when you're talking about with AI, you're some of the AI companies you're advising. How, what's your recommendations?
Yeah. So I ended up getting that question a good amount, right, from AI companies. And so for anyone that is curious about this and wants me to, hear like an hour-long explanation on a specific topic, I'd encourage you to go check out SaaS CMO Pro. That's my website. I've done a ton of videos on this stuff. They're all free. I just did it because, like, literally I kept getting the same questions, and I'm like, I wouldn't mind like showing the founder, here's like an hour-long video on just like, POG metrics or whatever it might be. But I will say, like, to kind of answer the tactical question, a lot of it is a culture mindset, right? The great news is a lot of the AI companies coming out are by definition new, right? They're not that old. There's a couple that have been doing AI for like 5 or 10 years, but most of them are like net new startups. And I will say, from working with a bunch of companies to try to like help them accelerate their growth, shift a customer centric mindset, a lot of times that has certain like PLG or product led growth initiatives in it. The earlier stage companies can really adapt very quickly to it and pivot and, kind of get the board behind it. I help them with, here's the right metrics. Here's culturally how we have to adopt it. Here's how, like, for instance, maybe we're going to do a model where people go in, they go straight into the product as opposed to naturally becoming a lead and then going through the sales team, right? Maybe they have a concept of a PQL, product qualified lead, right? Maybe you're measuring time to value, which is a classic like PLG, customer centric type metric. Like, those things are all easier at the earlier stage you are. Really, for the later stage companies, when I work with like, Series D, E, maybe they're public, that's where it becomes much more of a change management exercise, right? That's like just fundamentally trying to change a company, how they do work, how they're organized, the metrics they use. And I've seen a lot of them fail, and I've done videos just on that, right? Like, here's why this big company tried a PLG initiative and it totally failed. There's sometimes like I remember one, I couldn't believe this. It was a giant company, and I'm walking them through, okay, they want to do PLG, and walk me through like, what have you done so far? And they're like, well, we put, it's like, I think 1,000 people at the company. Well, we put one person on it. They're like the PLG person, right? And I was like, one person? Like it's like a company transformation, right? So it's definitely difficult, for anyone that's listening to this, like PLG or customer-centric is a very different paradigm shift than a normal, or I wouldn't say normal, like an old style SLG, sales-led growth, like playbook. And if you're going to do it, you really have to attack it on a number of levels.
When we think about that and think about executing your playbook and what are the metrics, you've said that most attribution models are broken. What are some of the signals or feedback loops that can help marketers truly understand how people are making buying decisions?
Yeah, attribution, man, it's a rough one, right? Because one thing that like I kind of implicitly always felt, and when I kind of dived into the analytics, was that these are journeys, right? Especially in B2B, right? You don't just see a billboard and go buy a 6-figure deal the next day, right? It takes time to like learn about this category, learn about this company. What do they do? Like, what are use cases? Talk to other people that are using it, start trying the product out, finally talking to sales. Like this is, in B2B, 6-month, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year deal cycles are very common based on the segment you're selling to. And attribution was always kind of weird because like I started getting into it at Salesforce, and a lot of the marketing automation tools were using like first or last click to give all the credit. And I'm like, wait a minute, like this, I would look at this deal and it'd have like 30 touches. And I'm like, why are we giving everything to the first or the last touch? Like, and again, it creates kind of these like weird perverse incentives where you're getting into like tagging wars on the marketing team and everyone's trying to take credit. And not only that, like a lot of companies would have this model of like, well, either marketing gets the credit or sales gets the credit or the partner gets the credit. I'm like, well, a lot of times these, like they're all working together to close this deal or to move it forward. And so I really didn't like the old style attribution model. I do like the idea of attribution. Like, hey, let's understand what helps move these deals through, what helps discover them, what helps close them. And I do recommend for companies that really want to get into the fine tooth attribution model, like use AI tools that can do regression analysis that look at every single touch, that apply credit, that understand trends. Or for other startups that are just kind of, don't have the dollars to maybe like invest in that or the time, just do like control groups, right? Control groups are where you basically say, we did this a lot at Slack when we were scaling up, or we'd say, hey, we're going to run this marketing campaign. Maybe it's an outdoor advertising campaign, whatever it is, but it's just going to be limited to a very specific region in the US. And the rest of the US will be the control group that doesn't get it, right? All right, what were growth rates? What are branding rates? How do they differ? Pipe, leads, all that stuff, right? And you can do that. Or maybe you're running an ABM campaign, right? And you say, hey, we have 100 accounts in our ABM campaign. Well, as opposed to all 100 getting it, just run it to 50, right? Have the other 50 never got the ABM campaign, and then measure, okay, what were the size of the deals? Like how long did they take? What was the acceleration? Yeah, there's all these metrics you can look at, but I think like when you just get into like first or last touch attribution, it really skews you. It's one of the reasons why Google SEM got so big, is because, one of the last things people do is do a branded search, click on it, and then go, buy from the organization. And, I think you have to challenge a lot of these things. And at least in my experience, like kind of understand that these were journeys, and really make the appropriate decisions from that.
When you are having a control group or you're looking at something like that, when do you dig deeper to find out the why? Get into, so why did 50 of these people click on this, or, do whatever?
Yeah. Well, I remember I was at Salesforce one time, and there was this big movement. Like, so Mark Benioff, amazing guy, incredible philanthropist, just towering, really tall guy too, right? can be intimidating. And he was always ahead of his times. He was always like 10 years ahead of his time, right? So, like we're talking like 10, 15 years ago, he was all on the social enterprise, right? He kind of understood how social was going to fundamentally transform. And he was building something internally. We called it Chatter, but eventually like Salesforce bought Slack, but it was kind of like that type of like internal social type tool. And he really was all in on this, right? And so he's like, hey, I want the homepage to read, Salesforce, the social enterprise, right? And in his mind, he totally got it, right? And he talked with press and analysts, they kind of got it. So we put it up there, and all of a sudden we're like, our leads are going down. And we're not as many people are converting. And so we're looking at this, and we're running this test. And at that point, we're like, well, we got to know the why, right? So we did a lot of like, at that time, I think we used I think it was 5secondtest.com. It's where you show a homepage for 5 seconds, it goes black, and then you ask the people, well, what do they do? What is this company about, right? And we're talking to these people, and they're all like, oh, well, I thought you sold software to nonprofits, right? And it wasn't for me, right? And so that was a really good example of like where, the messaging, which sometimes is great for analysts and press, and even for leadership in the company, as long as it's like, just what does the average person think of those words though, right? And like us understanding the why. And once we understood that, we were able to talk like, okay, we get it. Like maybe we still use that messaging, but very targeted for the right groups. But for average people coming in, we're going to use more language that they understand, and that can help explain what Salesforce is.
Yeah, just, we just went through this exercise, understanding why one particular guide or white paper was doing better than anything else. And it was like, oh, it has a link to it on the, the first tab on the homepage. And people are clicking on that tab first because of the positioning. It's not because you wrote that guide any better than anything else, Nathan. And just watching people do that, you go, oh, okay, I got it now.
Totally.
Slack and Zendesk and Salesforce, these are all, they're B2B brands that like are universal, really. I mean, they, grandmothers know what they are. How do you build that? How do you create a brand that goes beyond sort of that traditional boring B2B sort of, space?
Yeah, I think for me, my background and when I spent a lot of time B2C, and when it came to B2B, what I noticed was that a lot of B2B companies played it super safe, super conservative. They all kind of looked the same. They all kind of sounded the same. And consequently, like it was really hard for those companies to differentiate and separate from the pack. And, my time in B2C really taught me like, hey, you have to be different, right? You have to stand out from people. You have to talk a little bit different. You have to look a little bit different, right? And I really pushed when I was at, Salesforce, Zendesk, Slack, all in the marketing leadership roles, like, hey, I want to build a really unique brand. I want a brand that has a very unique editorial tone and voice. It has a very unique visual identity. So in case we're going to leverage mascots, we're going to do a lot of consumer type playbooks, right? And that's where really customer-centric came in too, right? Like, hey, it's not just your brand isn't like your logo or your slogan. It's like all these little touch points that people have with you, right? And were they positive touch points? Were they joyful touch points? We talked about content marketing. I know that's your side of the house. Like I ran a lot of content teams, and I always said, hey, I want you to build like helpful, good content. I don't want you to make slimy brochureware that just says why we're awesome in 20 different ways. Like just help them out, right? I remember our most popular piece of content at Zendesk was the top 10 interview questions for hiring customer support agents. Zendesk was not an ATS. We did not help hire customer support agents. We just helped solve tickets, right? But that was a really big pain point that a lot of customer support managers had. Like there's a lot of turnover. If you're in support, like it's a hard business, like it's stressful. You have a lot of turnover. So hiring is a really big part of their role. And that was really helpful for them. So I just think like eventually like, kind of merge all these together. Like the brand takes all those into consideration. And it's why when you're in marketing, sometimes you have to really look beyond the marketing team. You have to look at like, are we polluting bad experiences as part of the sales process or part of the product onboarding experience? Or like, I'm a big freemium guy. Like I never liked free plans that like were crippleware, right? That only like 3 features you could use and everything else was limited, right? Like, no, give them a good experience, right? Because that impacts the brand. And all those things matter, right? And a lot of times I would get pushback either when I help other companies or even at some of the companies I was at some point, somebody like, well, I don't know, Bill, like we're starting to move into the enterprise and they're not going to like we got to play it safe and talk in acronyms. And I would always hear that, but eventually like it wouldn't matter. Like people were people, right? And, a brand that you really love, even in B2B, right? You tend to talk about more. You tend to spend more with, you tend to, you don't tend to attrit as much, right? And you tend to expand more. So these are like really important metrics, right? When we get back to the original conversation, how do you grow efficiently? How do you have the right growth metrics and capital efficiency metrics? Like that comes back, a big part of it is the brand. And so like, that's just been kind of my experience, but I definitely believe like in B2B, there's a massive opportunity now, especially within AI where you have 20 competitors. Building a unique brand, it can really separate you and put you in a great position to succeed.
So the observation, I don't know if I have an observation. I'm just wondering, and we speak about AI and how everyone's just going to sound the same because they're all asking, for write a headline for this homepage. Yeah. And it's the same headline for everyone's product. But I'm wondering, what advice do you have for these marketers or other leaders to have that courage or find that courage or be able to enact on that courage, right? Because I think what you're really getting at is having the courage to do all this stuff. Why your AI startups that you're advising are using that old playbook, because it's like it's been used before, right? They what's the old saying? I can't remember what it was. It was something about IBM or whatever. You can't get fired.
You never
for
get
using
fired
IBM.
for recommending IBM. Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you find that courage? What can they do to, channel that?
Well, the good news is, look, a lot of the AI founders I work with are implicitly trying to build something amazing and big. And the founders are always thinking about the long run, right? Like they are thinking 5, 10, 20 years out. So usually that's not a hard group to believe in. Most of the VCs, hey, these are 10-year funds, right? So again, they want something big too. I think a lot of times where it breaks down is when you start building out your executive staff. And, a lot of times there's a temptation, well, I want to hire this person. They worked at Oracle. They've been there 20 years. Like, and then you end up taking that playbook, whatever they brought in. And again, like for 80% of companies, that's the normal playbook is SLG, sales led growth. That's what they've done. Now, new AI startups coming up are really leaning into more customer-centric, PLG, freemium models, a bunch of other type of go-to-market innovations. But I feel like there's, the courage is there. I think sometimes where it's hard is when you're an individual marketer as part of a big marketing team that's been doing things the old way. And to kind of like challenge that and to maybe, hey, maybe we're not using the right metrics. Maybe we're not doing the right playbook. Maybe we're not really being customer centric. That's hard, right? And I'll say a lot of the cycles that I personally spent at my time at Slack, Zendesk, and Salesforce were all on change management. Like I would literally spend a ton of cycles just talking to people and educating them. Here's why these playbooks can be different. Here's why they can work. Here's like how to implement it. Here's why we need to make this change, right? Like the actual playbook itself, I actually didn't think it was that hard. Like it's, all right, you do this, and this, but it's like convincing everyone else that, hey, this is a new model. It's a better way of doing it. Now, of course, once the metrics all start going up and to the right, it gets a lot easier to get that buy-in, but initially that's hard, right? And some of these by nature are a little bit more long-term. Like you're not going to see everything change in a week. It might be 6 months or 3 months or 9 months, right? So it is hard. There's a reason that everyone does it because it's very hard to change all the hearts and minds. It's very hard to pivot to a little bit more long-term type goals.
Speaking of that sort of working together and talking to those different teams, what's your advice on just that? What can marketing do to work better with product? What can product do to work better with marketing? What can they both do to work better with finance? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, the natural gravity that I've seen over time is that these teams are going to be siloed. And not only that, the bigger you get, the more siloed they get. Some of that is just physical proximity. So for those, startups that are still in offices and everything, right? Like as you get bigger, well, the marketing team's on one floor and the product team's on another floor. If you get really big, they're in a different building or a different city, right? And so, the natural gravity is you are going to get more siloed as time goes on. I found the only antidote that I've seen from this is try to share some metrics, like really like try to have not, like the classic was marketing and sales, right? Where they just have very different metrics. And a lot of that's like, you gave me crappy leads and well, you never followed up on them. And because they had wrong metrics, right? Like when I've seen marketing and sales teams share the same metric, maybe it's just closed ARR for the quarter. Wow, they really work together much more. And marketing really changes how they act and sales changes it too. But taking a more wider viewpoint, I really thought go-to-market is not just marketing and sales. It's marketing, sales, product. It's really all the teams looking at it holistically, right? So I like the idea of like, hey, one, reevaluate, do we have the right metrics? Are they customer-centric? Are they long-term oriented? Like, what are those? B, trying to like then share those metrics across multiple of these teams. And then C, if you're an individual marketing leader or just even an IC within marketing team, like meet with these other teams like regularly, right? Like I would always tell people on my team, like, hey, you should get to know these other, internal stakeholders. You should know, who's their significant other, like what are they like? You should get to know them like, more than just a total superficial level, like, become a true like, partner with these folks. And that's hard, because I think a lot of times, and I was guilty of this too, really early in my career where, I would have a job and I'd just be like heads down. Okay, I'm the same manager. I'm just going to optimize this campaign all day long. Right. And part of it in marketing is like really trying to understand like, hey, you have to build these partnerships. We have to spend cycles, doing projects that require other teams and educating folks and building momentum towards it. And that just takes a lot of cycles.
It goes back to something I've been thinking about a lot, and a lot of conversations we've been having on the podcast is like, you almost have to slow down and to speed up, slow down, build those relationships. Don't get caught up trying to launch campaign after campaign, but understand truly what you need to kind of move forward. I am wondering, as we wrap up, and we touched briefly on AI, what your thoughts are on AI and how marketers can be leveraging that. And also just what's your advice for marketers as they think about tomorrow's playbook, stuff that we're not even thinking about today? How can they be flexible in their mindset so that they adopt a playbook that they need to adopt at that point in time?
Yeah, it's a great question. On that last point there, I think it's really good to establish a mindset that, hey, the go-to-market, the marketing playbook can and should be changing every year, right? Like it really should evolve, and you have to leverage what our latest tools are, the latest trends. You have to go where the eyeballs are. It should be this fluid, dynamic playbook. And as part of that, you have to understand like what are the big macro trends on where people are spending time, and also what are the tools that are available to me, right? And I just think like AI is fundamentally changing and making us all like super marketers, to be honest, right? Like when I started my SaaS CMO Pro channel, like historically to kind of create that much content and do all this, like you might need a pretty big team. And I just was like, well, I'm going to use an AI tool for every place I can, right? And it really like outside of a couple of freelancers I use for editing, which we were talking about earlier, it's all like AI tools are allowing me to do the work that historically like a big team would take on. And so I just think like be open-minded. And I really think like there's not a single function in marketing that can't be using AI right now, right? We talked about like, the unique brand, right? And editorial tone and voice. And look, if you use, now there's like with all tools, bad and good ways, right? If you just ask a really generic way, well, what should the homepage say, right? And everyone's going to have the same homepage, right? Or maybe you go like, hey, we're going to build a really unique editorial tone and voice. And here's what it's going to sound like. Here are the values. Here are the quality. And now like we've written a bunch of articles. Now we're going to say, hey, AI, rewrite the 4,000 other pieces of content that we already have, but in this unique tone and voice, not just our marketing collateral, but also within the product, the onboarding, right? the success, like all this stuff, right? And make it whatever it is. It's unique. It's different. It just doesn't sound like everyone else here. That's a great example where AI, you can leverage and change the amount of content you have. Where in the past, it's so hard. I remember when I worked at Salesforce, we did a big messaging change. And there were like 10,000 assets that all needed to be updated. And we're like, oh my God, like how are we? And that's why like marketing teams push back when there's like the CEO's like, we got to change how we speak. And they're like, oh my God, like everything I have to update, right? But AI makes it easier now, right? And so I don't care if you're in video, if you're in attribution, you're in programmatic buying, AI can help you out and really make you a superpower, right? So I just think like it's a cool thing. I get it's a scary thing. But I think like the best marketers are just going to kind of adopt it and really lean into it.
I think as you're talking about that, I'm wondering how many people they go, oh, I need to do AI, so I'll just do a Google search for chat prompts for demand gen, and they use somebody else's chat prompt. Instead, be curious, channel your inner Spike Jones, and write down all the stuff that you have to do and say, how can AI help me do this one step? And then kind of come up with your own prompt, maybe do it that way. I don't know. But
yeah. And I'll say for the marketing leaders that are maybe listening too, I think it's really good to give them cover. Give your team cover. Like, it's okay, guys. Some of these AIs are going to make a mistake and it's going to look a little weird or embarrassing. It's okay. We're going to make some mistakes as we lean into this. It might hallucinate at one point or it just doesn't work out, but that's all right. Like, you have to give your team cover to try these new things and to embrace them.
How does the leader stay authentic to that point and not sound or not be interpreted by, me as being, oh, he just wants me to train my AI replacement?
Yeah, it's definitely a larger issue, right? Is AI enabling us? Is it, replacing us? What does it look like for marketers? But in general, like, I'll say this, when I've seen companies grow fast, right? Like, if you're helping your company grow faster, that's something that's going to be always in demand. And I think like trying to resist using it isn't a winning playbook in the long run, right? You're just going to get replaced by someone else that does it. So I don't know. I just think like I try to be an optimist on this stuff with AI. Like, I do have, I've got a daughter. She'll be going into the workforce, and I want to believe that, hey, AI is going to allow really anyone to create businesses, to do things they couldn't in the past, because there's going to be so many helping functions within it. But it is scary. There's some scary elements to it. It's incredibly powerful. It's going to change how marketers do their jobs, how many of us they need. And, the best advice I can say is just lean into it and get to know it, because you'll be much better equipped than the person that doesn't lean in.
Yeah. And truly know your audience. Like, if you can know your audience and know how to use these tools, you'll still have a job somewhere.
Absolutely.
So, I'm trying to end on a higher note.
There we go.
I really enjoyed our conversation. How does someone learn more about you and SaaS CMO and all that?
Yeah, so the website is SaaS CMO Pro. So you can go there. Or you can go to YouTube. I created like a lot of video content. Really, it was all the questions I used to get asked by a lot of my advisor or board member. I just started creating videos on it because I was so lazy. I'm like, just watch the video, right? So if you want to learn about any of this stuff, customer-centric, PLG, freemium, brand stuff, like I love that stuff. It's totally free. I just want to help out, other marketers that are kind of going through the similar things. And of course, you can always hit me up on LinkedIn. Happy to connect there as well.
Great. Bill, thank you so much.
Yeah, it was such a pleasure having me, Nathan. I really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks so much.